Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about inspiring literacy in children. How do you teach children to get excited about reading and writing and expressing themselves and making that more fun? Well, today joining us is Susie Harder, and she is the founder of the Junior Authors Program. And it's a community project that engages students around the world in collaboratively writing a children's book. And this children's book is sold to raise funds for families that have lost their homes in the California Creek fire last about a year ago. And so I'm really excited to have her here. And Karen Schwab from Interview Valet introduced us. So thank you, Karen. I so appreciate all of the booking agents, and Interview Valet is one of the top booking agents. And they've sent me some incredible guests. And so I just so appreciate them supporting this show and giving us great guests to talk with, like Susie. And Susie, welcome to Leaders of Transformation. We're excited you're here today.
Hi, Nicole. It's so fun to be included in this wonderful group of people that you have interviews with. When I was listening to some of your prior guests, I just kept thinking, oh gosh, who am I going to listen to next? This is so fun. She's such good people.
Well, we do cover the range, that's for sure, in terms of topics. so we've, and I like those conversations. So I like making it diverse. And, the podcast is really, the theme of the podcast is really transformation. Yes, it's leadership, but it's transformational leadership. And that's what you're doing in such a unique way. And one of the things that I love doing is having conversations with people that are doing things in a unique way. So it busts the paradigm of how things are done. And I think really gives our listeners an opportunity to explore for themselves and saying, well, wow, she did that and he did this. And what could I do to make a difference in my local area? And so it's really, really powerful. So I'm excited to have you share a little bit about Junior Authors Program. So let's start off with like how you came up with it, what inspired you to do it. I mentioned, of course, the California Creek fire. Tell us a little bit about that for people that aren't familiar with what happened.
Absolutely. So, and isn't it fun to think outside the box? I think all of us
Totally.
that have so many ideas. It's just so fun to kind of go there. My clinical expertise is in speech language pathology. And so I work in the schools and in private practice with kids. And the focus, I was a generalized practitioner for many years, and then also specialized in working with children who stutter. So I have this kind of background in, I love kids. I love working with kids. I love kids feeling heard and seen. And most speech pathologists, because we're so rooted in building those early communication skills, really utilize books. And so kind of like how a preschool teacher would, we can take any book and make however many conversations or lessons and goals and bring it all together. And so the mountain community that I grew up in when the Creek Fire started this last Labor Day, my immediate thought was, let's create a really supportive, wonderful book where these kids can see their journey and really use it as kind of the front for all of these conversations that need to happen. And let's help them process what's happening. Let's build out some writing prompts and some conversational prompts. Let's build out a grief journal based on it. Let's kind of just provide this type of support for these kids. And then it just really blossomed into kind of this collaboration of all of the skills and background things. And so ended up pretty quick. So within that first month, the book was written and being edited and illustrated. And then I really wanted to include kids, and more powerful than producing this final product and saying, here you go. It was, what if we could actively involve kids in building a book, in seeing behind the scenes? And so when I do Zoom appearances for either school-wide or a classroom, we usually have some sort of conversation at the beginning saying, has an author ever called you and said, what should go on the cover? Or which font should we use? Or what should this character look like? And, all the kids are, no. Me neither. But you know what? Here's your call. You get to decide what goes into this book. And so there's this kind of bigger theme of kids feeling heard and seen. And then there's the aspect of, if we want kids to be engaged in reading and we want kids, all of these things, especially after, at least time of recording right now, this distance learning period of time, let's really actively involve them and not tell them what they should be doing, but let's do something super fun. And from the outside, it just seems like, oh, cool, I get to vote and help build this book. And then all the other things that are happening from the other side. So we get to do lots of behind the scenes. This morning, a pop-up vote went out about, we have a junior authors page for the first page of the book where they get to write, this book was created by, and it has a name and age for them to fill in. And this junior author is known for being, and they get to write in some of the characteristics of things that are positive about what their traits are. And so there's a little bank of things, but kind of like compassionate, patient, open-minded, resilient. And so there was a pop-up vote on the design of that page, and they get to decide what is it that's going to go in the book. And so we do lots of videos, lots of check-ins. They get to ask the author questions about writing. It's about once a week. We do an Ask the Author Live, and kids write in, and their questions are just so fabulous because some of them are really wondering, you're kind of like, well, they say, do you have to do a sloppy copy? And I had never heard that term before. And my assumption is it's a rough draft. And so we were talking a lot about, editing and how much work it is. And the fact that your teachers might ask you to edit something. And it's not because they're being mean. It's not because they want you to do extra work. And I hold up my pile of, this is how many edits. This is how many versions of this book I've done. Can I show you the first copy? It's so messy. And I've worked on it so much, it gets better every time. And if I stopped at the beginning, it wouldn't be as good as it is right now, because ideas continue to grow and evolve. And just like any good project, it starts with the concept of what it is, but then it blossoms as you put attention and work into it. And so there's all these life conversations that get kind of captured in these small little bite-sized bits for kids. And we have kids from 2 all the way up through middle school and high school that are enjoying being involved in this. But I mean, so coming back to the real reason was that we are wanting to support kids who have lost homes. And in the community, it's been really interesting watching the evolution of, we're about 7-8 months out from when the Creek Fire first started, and watching, what supports are generally available post disaster, which things are not. And what I was really wanting and needing for the kids here locally was something positive to be involved in that wasn't kind of like the splash support of the really, and those things are so, so crucial and important. And then after those first few weeks, those are gone. And it's just, life is back, but it's not back for them. And so figuring out, are we waiting until things really go wrong and these kids have behavioral outbursts and meltdowns and all of these things, and parents are being pushed to the brink? Or could we do something in a more proactive sense and have these kids involved in something that's inspiring and fun, and allowing them to travel that journey in a really positive way? And with this kind of guided reframe of, it's not us always going back to the fire, but it's us looking at rebuilding. And so the last half of what we've been doing has been rebuilding for the animals in the book, and they get to build and design and send in ideas and vote on things and really be actively involved in that part of us creating the story.
Well, there's so much to this simple, quote unquote, simple idea. When you talk about children's opportunity to be able to be seen, be heard, to be inspired, to even read, to be involved, and even become a published author at such a young age, and to have that accomplishment, the collaboration, you talk about even processing their grief. And I think what happens a lot of times, and we've had people on our show here who are in the disaster relief business in terms of supporting them. I introduced you to Naisha Mitchler. And so, those things are really, really important. Like, when your house is no longer there, all the things that you're missing, not just the shelter, but all of the things that are in your house that you usually,
Your
that
comfort.
you need, your comfort and the material things. And those things are really important: food, shelter, clothing, and all of that. But from an inner standpoint of the inner healing and the inner needs
Yeah.
that children have, it's a lot of times it's focused on function, right?
Yes.
And or if there is a specific situation, let's say there's post-traumatic stress or those kinds of things. But in this case, it's like children, their creativity, their view of the world, how they the meaning they make of things in those moments are life changing. And so to have an opportunity where they can express it and how they're feeling and be part of something that's creating. And we talked about even like the idea of, what about having kids help build playgrounds and help them write the books that they would want to read, rather than adults saying, this is the book that we're going to give you to read, and involving them in that process. There's just so much. There's so much there that I just thought, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. And anyone can do this. I mean, obviously you have a background in specialty in this, but I think of all the teachers, that could get involved in a project like this, these schools that could come alongside you and get involved in projects like this and really inspire literacy, inspire creativity, inspire self-expression, and that confidence in children. It's amazing. And not all kids want to go out and play sports. And so, and not to say that it's an alternative either or. Like, I loved both. I loved sports and I loved academics and I loved to read, and to be able to give them an outlet for that is really, really amazing. And especially nowadays, like when kids they go on their computer and they're on their video games and so forth. And this draws them. It's kind of like you've gamified literacy. You've gamified becoming an author and getting excited about learning how to read and write and story build and character build and so forth. It's awesome. It's awesome.
And it's kind of like, I love the word gamify, because we had talked a little bit about that, where, instead of building an avatar for this video game world, we're building things. And then we've done so much conversation about the character building side of Ava's our main character and Charlie's her dog, and Charlie's who loses his doghouse. And we did so much conversation about, what makes a hero? And, does a hero always have a cape? And what is it that she could be doing that would make her a hero in this community? And how do you take time to identify someone in need? And within the book, there's some strategic places where kids have to find one of the animals that hasn't yet had a home and, is sad. And, it's kind of like everyone wants to go play, but, what should we do? And kind of that struggle. And, there is something so fun about it, almost coming back to the basics of, let's just make this really interesting. And it's not screen based and it's not at you. You're actively involved in it and building it. And the idea that I've talked about with some of the kids is, kind of going from your blah to aha. And this year has been hard. And with packets and with distance learning, there's a lot of blah. And there's a lot of things that you have to do because you're supposed to do. And my shift was, let's give you something you can do, that you get to do. And it was so fun seeing kids and parents writing in and teachers, everyone's finishing their packet so they can work on the book, and here it's writing prompts and things that are very, phoneme driven and this and grade level appropriate kind of worksheets. And they have the characters on them and we're working on things, but it's embedded within the context of the story. And so they're kind of like, I get pictures all the time of these kids that are working on the book, and the colorings that they do and the ideas that they have that they're sending is so fun to watch. So, that idea that you are creating your own story and what that really means as a person, that you're not given a story, you are creating your own story, your life. It's up to you. What are you going to do with it? How is this going to unfold? Take time, build it correctly, and then let's celebrate and let's have fun with it. And, just a lot of those big, really big life things that are condensed into it. So, and like you mentioned, the schools, it's so neat that so many kids have been, and teachers have been excited and kind of like, when's the next book? We need to do more of these. And so we have that coming up next fall. And we have a lot of teachers and schools that are ready to jump in. And over the summer, what I'm planning to do that I'm excited about is to get teacher input, because let's build the books that teachers want for their classrooms to be able to facilitate the conversations that need to happen. And I know that, you know, as a speech pathologist, and then in the schools that I work with, there's always those things that you're trying to teach. And so instead of trying to find the book that kind of matches what you're trying to teach, let's just create the book that can teach the things that we want to teach. And then it's so easy for us to create build out materials that are classroom materials for writing stations or for, you know, whatever that might be that pertain to it. And then kids are excited because it's about something that they're really doing. It's very purposeful. It's, you know, it's in the here and now. It's not kind of this random thing that I got online.
Well, and this can be used for different age groups either. It's not like just for young kids. I mean, this can be age appropriate, where the book and the complexity of the book and, you know, the narrative and so forth develops as kids are older. You know, like you could do this in high school and have it be completely relevant and interesting, because that's a problem. A lot of kids get bored.
Yeah.
You know, I know when I was growing up, some of the smartest kids were the ones that were the most bored in school, because their mind was so creative and they weren't provided outlets, limited outlets, you know, for creative writing class. I'm talking high school now, you know, so they have their creative writing class. But I remember even with my teacher, and, you know, I know there's some amazing teachers out there. So, I remember my English teacher telling me that, you know what, you'll never be good at creative writing, because I didn't fit the mold of what she expected and how it was supposed to go. And what's interesting is that later on, I started to write blogs or whatever the case is, and people were like, wow, they're really well written. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because my teacher said that I wasn't going to be any good at that. And I believed her. And so I, for many years, didn't write anything, because I thought, well, she knows better, right? So how many times do kids, you know, get forced into a box? Or you have those kids that are not going to go in the box, like they're going to refuse to be conformed to, you know, to some mold. And those are the kids oftentimes are the ones that actually become entrepreneurs and game changers, leaders of transformation, are those ones that are like, how about we do it this way? And so if you can create that space, and I think it's really powerful and valuable to inspire entrepreneurship, because I believe entrepreneurship is really a mindset, and it's a way of being versus a vocation, if you will. And so it's not a thing you do, it is who you are. And so you bring that to whatever, and you're creating something. It's very creative, it's very innovative, and so forth. So as I said, I think it's really fantastic. Now, one of the things that we talked about when we were talking previously is, you know, you get a lot of ideas, right? And you, right, both of us, you know, and I think most people like who are listening, they're like, wow, I have all these great ideas. Some of them, maybe they follow through in, a lot of them they don't. What inspired you to, because I'm sure there was that moment where it's like, I've got a lot going on. What, should I really be doing this?
Right.
What caused you to decide to go for it versus putting it on the shelf with like the many ideas that you may have had over the years to do really cool things, but this one really landed? What made that difference for you?
I love that question. And I think that is such an important moment in time to capture and to figure out what was that shift, and to give kind of a brief snapshot of, you know, life, say September 4th versus September 9th. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old at home. Well, at that time they were 2 and 5. And I, you know, own my practice. I work in the schools. I love life. I love being with my family, and I love my job. And I do a lot of resource-based things and continuing ed courses. And, so things were full, and I try to avoid the term busy, but days were full. And if anyone would have said, do you think you could add in another 40 hours a week and no one's going to pay you, and actually you should probably give away all your clients so you can focus on this one thing, so I think you should do that. Normal me would have said, there's no way. I have small projects around the house that have been waiting for years. I haven't even gotten to those. Why would I take on this giant thing? And so the shift for me was that it had nothing to do with me. It is bigger than you, and it's you being utilized for your skill set in a really powerful way that's needed right now. And, kind of going back to the ideas part of it, it's kind of like it starts as one idea, but then it's this layer of all of these other ideas that are coming. And when you then have that layer and you're kind of like, this is what I need to do right now. There's no question about it. There is no deciding. There is no weighing the options. It's just, this is what I need to do. Is this a good time for this? Probably not. And that's okay, because this is what needs to happen. And so it just felt very, I remember telling my husband even that first week, like, this is what I need to be doing right now. And those first few months of it were really hard, I think, as a spouse, well, on both of us, because I could see it and he was supportive, but it wasn't actually there yet. And so he was, dad of the year at home, doing all of these things to help support me. And we were still on distance learning. So anytime that I was working meant he was on duty. There was no off duty. And so, then I would kind of like, there were just too many pieces to juggle. And I remember maybe a month or two in, coming home, and we had been doing, live votes every night, Facebook Live. And at that point, everything was a 24-hour vote. And so there was so much intensity and excitement and just adrenaline with all of it. And I had built my website out, and I had built this voting-based platform, and all of these things, is getting all these schools involved. And I came home and was kind of like, oh, did you see the news clip today? No. Okay. Have you seen the website that I built? No. Okay. Did you have the kids get on and vote today? No. And I was kind of like, oh man, this is a really difficult place, because he is doing more than he signed up for right now. He is taking on all of it. And here I am still asking, but can you also support me in these ways? And I'd say that chunk of time to make it through that was the hardest, because it doesn't yet exist. And then as you start getting some momentum and it exists a little bit differently and it's a little bit more concrete, then it makes sense to people and you start getting a little bit more support. But that first part, I mean, it's almost like there's no room to doubt yourself, because if you're truly believing, this is the time, this is the reason, and I have these skills, this is exactly how my skills need to be used right now. It's kind of, in my mind, at least, it was kind of like, this is a combination of all of the things that I've done to help people over the years, and it pulls those together, and it feels kind of like this is what needs to happen. And so I did. And thankfully, Brian has been amazing, and we got through that, and now we're good. He had the kids vote all the time. So.
Well, it is, you mentioned about support, right? And it is having that support, and whether it's a spouse or what, but some people, they don't get the support of their spouse. And so they, they need to go that, like you did for a little bit, to go that distance to get to the point where there was something that you could show that they could start to buy into the vision. But but it also speaks to the fact that you do need to have support, whether it is a friend or somebody that believes in you, or you see some progress with the people that you're helping and so forth. I think that's important. But when you don't have that, it's got to come from inside. Like, and you said, it's not an option. Like, it's not an option. I've got to do this. I know I need to do this. And that's trusting your intuition and knowing that this is something that just needs to happen, and trusting that God. And I think a lot of times, I remember one of my mentors said, Nicole, you don't trust yourself. And I'm thinking, yeah, I trust myself. What are you talking about? And it took a long time for me to figure out what he was talking about, what he was noticing in me. that I wasn't noticing in myself, where I was second guessing myself, where I was selling myself short. And I think oftentimes we do that and we'll say like, oh no, I trust myself. But when you dig deeper, you realize to a certain point, I trust myself. And then beyond that, I need the validation from someone else.
Absolutely. And I was
And
just
so
thinking
it's
that too.
like,
Yeah.
wow, and so there's that opportunity for growth, and
Yeah.
ideas die on the operating table, if you will, because people second guess themselves. And
Yeah.
when it doesn't happen, because we're in this microwave world where it's got to be like this instant success or instant hit. And when that doesn't happen, it's like, well, maybe I wasn't
It
supposed to
can
do
be
this.
deflating.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
maybe this
And
is
that
the wrong.
validating. Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I
Yeah.
mean that's the thing, right? It's like it's not very validating, and you're looking for that validation. And so it's just an inspiration to see how you're doing this. And there's so many things that you're teaching along the way that I think your kids are going to learn, your people around you are going to see. And that, as an entrepreneur, people don't, you don't realize how many people, and I say entrepreneur, whether it's starting a nonprofit
Mhm.
or whatever, again, it's a way of
Mhm.
being, it's creating something out of nothing. You don't realize how many people are actually watching you,
Yeah.
you know, and are
And
being inspired by you while you're just doing your thing.
you're just doing your thing. And I think that there's so many parts within that are powerful. The validation part is such an interesting one, because I think that, like you, I would say I'm confident in my skill set as a speech language pathologist. I'm confident in my skill set as a mom. And going into this, I felt so passionately about the purpose of it. And it was not very validating, because there were so many things that I was doing that were not getting any sort of traction. And it really wasn't to get traction, but it was, I had this idea of, if kids are missing out and they're not voting at the beginning, I can't go back and open that up. So I'm really trying to make sure that at least all of the kids here locally know that this is an option. And that was my driving force. Had it been something related to me, I would not have tried so hard. And it would have been kind of like, I open up that email and I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Or, I'm trying to do something and then I pull back from it. And so the idea that what you're doing, it does need to be so driven from what it will look like, and not what it looks like right now, and not the attention that it's getting right now. In one of the books that I was reading most recently, they were talking about, I'm not, it almost sounds violent, bullets versus cannonballs. And, it's so not who I am, but the idea that, it's really easy when you have an idea to shoot your cannonball, and then you have to start from scratch. Also, you shoot your bullets, you find your target, and then you do your cannonball, and kind of figuring out which things are which, what falls in what category. And if something doesn't hit, that's okay. That's just a bullet. That's just a piece of the idea. And so, just kind of trusting within and sticking with it.
Yeah.
It's a long
Yeah.
process.
Well, and talk about the importance of building a foundation to grow from. So, and I know we're kind of getting into the entrepreneurial space. We're going to circle back, but I think it's important for our listeners who are aspiring to make a difference. And so I think this is really valuable for people that are going to be listening. I know that I learn a lot from my guests, and have learned from you just in the way that you've approached it. One of the things that you mentioned when we were talking previously that I wanted to touch on was this idea of having a foundation, because if you just keep throwing ideas, and or like in your analogy of the bullets, and you're shooting all over the place, but you're not shooting with a focused direction, and you're not finding that target or building a foundation to progress from, then it's like a sieve. Everything just kind of goes through the sieve. And I find that a lot nowadays through my coaching, working with entrepreneurs and people that are launching nonprofits, is that it's like they're all over the place, and they have great ideas, but their ideas are not building on top of one another.
Mm-hmm.
They're just random ideas. And then they're wondering why they're not actually gaining any traction and seeing the rewards of all their effort, if that makes sense. So
Absolutely.
you mentioned how you were building this foundation, and you're like, we started here and then we're building to this next level and we're building to this next level. So if you can talk about just briefly how that, like,
Mhm.
what does that practically look like?
Yeah.
And what is the mindset that you have while you're doing that?
Yeah, I love the analogy of the sift too, because I feel like many of us who wake up with ideas and go to bed with ideas, they are just ideas. And then even if we're taking the time to follow up on some of them, they don't really have a landing place. And so when I was thinking about, just my work with kids, and up until recently, it's been through my private practice. And so if I have ideas for parents, then I can channel that through, let me do a parent course that's aimed at this and help in this way. Or if I have these play-based ideas, let me shift that and use that here. And this has been a really fun foundation for all of those things that I truly feel are so important about what kids need. And so oftentimes as a parent and as a clinical service provider, I have notes to self, right? Of here's the things that I really would love for kids to value right now. Here are the shifts that I would really like to see. And those are all just words until we're doing something to help make that difference. And so, I've always been, like board games and fun games over video games. And so my whole office is filled with games when kids come and play, and then they're asking for Christmas, they're asking for the actual games instead of video games, which I love. But it's, kind of doing the things that pulling those pieces together that are so important. And so for literacy and for this concept of kids feeling heard, in distance learning and with everything that's happened this last year, a lot of kids have really been, and not purposely, but robbed of the sense that they get to do independent decision making. And, everything is so micromanaged. And in a school day, they get to kind of navigate that and be a child. And are they perfect during the day? No, but that's just part of what it is. And at home, it's just the situation doesn't really allow for that. And so the piece that we're having kids connected, we're having kids feel heard, all of the ideas that I have about, what it is that we should be showing kids, not telling them to do, but showing them. They all kind of have a landing spot now. And so whenever I wake up thinking, oh my gosh, what would be so neat, then I have a place for that. So that has been really neat. And just kind of the concept of reframing for kids. And like you mentioned, the limiting beliefs and how careful and cautious we should be as adults when we're telling kids what their value is or what they're good at or not good at or comparing against. And so, just figuring out that, like I use the iceberg analogy for a lot of things within my field, kind of what it is you see and what's actually happening below the surface. And in the concept of stuttering, it's the overt moments of stuttering that you see versus the, 90% of the icebergs under the water. And those are all the behind the scenes things that are happening. And one of the things that I saw most recently was a version of that, but it had success at the top. And then it had all the things that go into that. And especially with high achieving parents looking at how they're raising their kids, it's so easy to focus on the success that it's easy to forget that all of the parts that make that are the below the scenes, all of those reframing things, all of the persistence, all of, just the growth mindset stuff in general. And that we have an opportunity to tell kids and show kids how to do that. And it will end up being success if they have all of those pieces there. And so I think that us being able to, and that's intentionally why I call them my junior authors. So instead of it being, because it's not a writing class, it's not, anything really academic. It's kind of the original name was Teachable Moments. And that's what it is we're taking moments and kind of shifting how we're looking at it, and even teaching parents who maybe need some guidance or some ideas about how to do that. How do you praise your child in a really constructive way? Because saying good job is good, but that's really empty. So what is it that is good about what happened? Is it good because I got a good grade, or it's good because I studied really hard and worked really hard on that? What is it that was good about what you did? And really teaching and practicing that specific type of praise to help build all of those characteristics.
Yeah, I hear there's this hub, this focus of, like you said, what's underneath the surface, what's the bigger part of the iceberg. It's like the roots that determine the fruits. And so when you focus on those things and you build a foundation and you find this hub of focus, like you have a common mission, a common theme, and then everything is building off of that. So it can become your anchoring, centering point. And I think that's really important. Even like for this podcast, sometimes people will ask me and they'll say, what kind of tips do you have? Because I'm thinking of starting a podcast. And I'll say, one of the things that I would really encourage you to do is choose a topic, choose a theme, and then stick to it. So don't get pulled off into this direction because you're getting requests from guests, people want to be on your show that are talking about this other thing, and saying, well, yeah, I could probably do that, and fit that in, and kind of, if once you start doing that, then where's the line? Where's the boundary? And you start wandering off into a different direction, and then you wonder how you got there. Or your listeners are disconnected because they were expecting one thing and they're getting another. And so there's a disconnect, there's an incongruence there. And so what I'm hearing you talk about, it's like this focus on how can we help kids be seen, be heard, and be able to self-express and be involved in the process and have those teachable moments. And so your mind then is focused on so when it goes into ideation, it's going into things that will support that. And as obvious as this sounds, I know that I am sure there's someone listening out there who can attest, and because I know I've done it myself, we have all these ideas and they're off in different directions, and you lose sight of that centering focus. And so it's a reminder to say, hey, you know what is your focus? Stay on mission and build on that foundation, and you'll start to see the rewards and the momentum that's built out of that. So speaking of which, you have 3 pillars on which you have built your initiative here. So can you talk about those 3 pillars?
Yes. So, and I think that that's such a great lead in. And, as someone with so many different directions of what I think is important and, kind of going that way, having a business coach or having someone that you can talk to about that and that they kind of help rein those things in and kind of say, what I hear you saying is important to you really falls in this category. And I know that at the beginning, it was really hard for me to define for myself what are the main things, because I know my brain. And so it's kind of like, I've got lots of things and I don't know, all of these are important. And so having someone that you really trust and value to be able to work with to kind of sort through some of those and to pull out. And then that is clarifying for you, because then you can work directly and kind of more systematically to align things and to build that foundation. So the 3 pillars that we're working under junior authors are vote, publish, give. And they're all very intentional. Voting is because we have a voting-based platform, it's the big picture thing is we want kids to vote. On a kind of just more immediate scale, it's I want kids to feel heard. I want kids to be involved. It's a way of being it, to build what it is we're doing and to do it together. And the idea that it's not really about who wins the vote. In the end, the book is going to be great. The story is going to be great. If you picked a different doghouse, if you picked a different set of flowers, it's all going to be okay. And I know some of the parents were initially really worried about that. What if my child votes and it doesn't win? That's good. That's a good experience. And we're doing this collaboratively. It's kids worldwide that are helping and we're all putting our ideas in. The value of that is that we are doing something as a giant group of kids across the world. It's not about who wins. And so that's the voting part. And then the publishing part is really the literacy-based part, and seeing behind the scenes and really appreciating books and seeing those cool things about knowing, the background of ISBNs, and that they used to be 10 numbers, but now they're 13, and that you have a different ISBN for a paperback versus a hardcover versus a board book. And just all of those, looking at covers and saying, gosh, I'm noticing that most covers have the title in the upper third. I've never noticed that before. And those attention to details that really do stick with and resonate and build that bond with literacy. So that piece of it has been super fun for me. And then the give part is this current project is all about kids who lost homes, and the future model of what we're doing in the schools starting next fall is that the books will be available to the schools at cost so that they can do a fundraiser for their local community. And so it's important to me that we're building the idea of young philanthropists, and that they're actively doing something. It's not about money, but that they're contributing to a project that is helping other kids in whatever way that is. So
I love that. And inspiring the philanthropy, inspiring the generosity, again, one of those like voting, publishing, and giving, all of them build on it. Like, so these kids can learn skills for their whole life. Like, these are life skills. That one in particular, I think, is awesome because it's a way of really inspiring generosity, which is so important nowadays. And so there's collaboration, there's learning, there's the yearn to learn, there's so much in it. And then being able to help and serve others and do something that's meaningful so that they feel like I'm actually contributing, so that it also takes them out of victim. So as an example, they have lost their home. They're the one that's experiencing the trauma. And so you're coming alongside them and supporting them, but you're doing it in such a way that gets them beyond that to, okay, so we take care of you, and how do you help another person, and to get outside yourself. And all of those things are really important. I mean, it's funny because when you're talking about voting, I'm thinking, yeah, let's get kids out there voting, and even as they grow up and they actually have the ability to vote.
Exactly. Yes.
That they actually take that opportunity to do it and to express, their opinions and so forth in that way. It's so powerful. Now, I know that you put together a page for our listeners, juniorauthors.com/LOT. What types of things or resources are you going to be putting together for that page?
So I'm going to put together a fun little activity packet that is exclusive, for this book that our illustrator and I designed. And it will be a collection of the coloring pages and things for younger kids. But then also we have a whole unit that we did on Illustrator Notes that there's kind of two versions. One is for K1, 2, and then one is more 3, 4, 5, 8 grades, 3, 4, 5. And maybe older too, but I'll put those in there. And we have some writing prompts and, just things that really kind of give some fun things to be doing that go alongside the theme of the book and help build out those conversations and the meaning of what's in there, so that we can talk about voting, we can talk about publishing, we can talk about giving, and that it's all anchored. So I'll go ahead and I'll set that up so that, like you said, juniorauthors.com/LOT, and then I'll have that ready for you guys.
That is awesome. And that's for parents, obviously kids as well, of course,
and
but teachers as well that can use it. That is fantastic. How do schools get involved right now? If they are listening, somebody's listening to this and they're saying, you know what, we could really use some of that, or we would like to get involved. How can they do that?
So they can nominate their school. Next year, we will be doing it. So you would have to be at a junior authors school, and then everyone at the school has access to it. The teachers can do it in any of their classrooms, and they'll have all the, worksheets and things that go along with it. So on the website, juniorauthors.program.com, there's a way to submit and nominate your school to be included. And then they can jump in with us next year. We'll be doing one in the fall and one in the spring. And it will be guided based on what teachers are wanting the message to be. And then we'll create a story in a very similar way. We'll have kids vote and build it. And then it will be available and, and as a fundraiser for their school.
Fantastic. I love it. I think it's such a great idea. Last question for you is, where do you envision this going?
Yeah. So, gosh, isn't it funny when you have that mind and you're kind of like, gosh, I've already gone so far. I've gone down the rabbit hole. So the part that I'm really excited about that I don't think anyone even knows yet, but they will now. This will be kind of the sneak peek of it, is that the books starting next fall, they are going to, so authorable is the name of kind of what they fall under, but it will be that the text is open. So meaning that I won't be writing the text for the story, that the books will come out and have space. So each child will actually be writing the text in their own book. And so the book will be uniform in that the cover and the junior authors page and the illustrations, we will have built that together. And then each child will have their copy that they get to physically write. And so within the classrooms, they can, they can kind of do their rough drafts and then do peer edits and kind of make it the editing process and then have their final draft ready. And then when they get their book, then they can write their final draft. And then they have that kind of keepsake and that, from the beginning, I keep thinking about this just really intimate bond with literacy and kind of that ownership and that keepsake part of it. And there's something so sweet and wonderful to me about a child's handwriting being in the book and telling their story, and the idea that they get to take whatever perspective they want from the story. They get to highlight the things that are meaningful to them. They get to, it's such just a neat kind of capture in time of that child. And so that is coming up. I'm so excited. We get to do a whole team of teacher ambassadors and SLP, so speech language pathology ambassadors, to really just help this be something that people get to share their ideas about what they want and need, and then let's make it.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. It's creative. I love it. Susie, I think it's awesome. And so thank you for doing this. Thank you for setting aside the busy, to use that word, the busyness of your life, the fullness of your life, as you said, and being willing to do that. What I love about Leaders of Transformation is that they do go beyond themselves and even sacrifice some of their own comfort to be able to help others and to inspire. And that's some of the best ideas that come out.
So much sacrifice.
It's worth it. It's worth it.
100-hour weeks for the last, I was describing it the other day as, that 15 minutes before someone comes to your house and how much cleaning you can do in 15 minutes when there's no thought behind it and there's no room to not do it. You just do it. And you think, gosh, if I did this more often, how great would my house look? And then imagine that all day. And then imagine that for 7 months. So that's what I feel like it has been. And, I wouldn't take a day of it back, but you're right. It's not comfortable. It's not, but then that's why you're doing it to be meaningful, right? It's not for yourself. It's to do something that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we lived our life like that, what could we accomplish? And, and how much, and not just accomplish like in terms of tangible things, but even just from an inner satisfaction and expanding ourselves and our relationships and our impact and all of that. And, it's like the saying, right? If you love what you do, you never work another day in your life. And I think that's so true here. And so you might work harder than you've ever, quote unquote, harder than you've ever worked before. And like you said, that concentrated effort, but it's so much more worth it than doing the grind, as so many people call it, and grinding it out, if you will.
That's the worst fear.
It's the worst. Yeah. Yeah. So Susie, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate you. And we thank you to our listeners for being here. I trust that this inspired you. And I believe that leaders of transformation take action. So maybe it's inspired you to dust off an idea that you have on the shelf that maybe you just convinced yourself that you don't have time for, or that you've been afraid of taking action on because you're not sure if it'll actually work. Well, you'll never know if it's going to work until you give it a go. And so I encourage you to take action if you need support on that. If you need a mentor, find somebody that can help you. I mean, I coach people for a living, but there's a lot of coaches out there, people that can certainly help you along that journey. And as Susie talked about, even bringing those ideas, honing them, and getting to your focal point so that you can build on that. And so, give it a go and see where it goes. You might be surprised at how rewarding it is and how it literally is life-changing for you, but also the people around you and who you can impact. It's just incredible. So I encourage you to do that. Also, go, of course, check out what Susie's doing, juniorauthors.program.com. And when you go to /LOT, there's going to be some really cool resources for kids and for parents to use with their children, and of course, teachers and so forth. So make sure you take advantage of that. Check out what they're doing. You can also find them on Facebook at Junior Authors Program and see what they're doing. And maybe that'll continue to inspire you along your journey. And we'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com. Let us know what you're up to, what you're thinking of doing. If there's some way we can support you, let us know. We appreciate you. Again, thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.